We'll start by setting our motivation. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so far we've done the shorter version last night of this practice, and then a couple versions of the longer practice. And the reoccurring themes are things like the Guru Buddha, things like the 3 places being marked by syllables, themes like light going out, light coming in, all sorts of repeated visualization themes, even if the variations of the visualization are different. And then particular to this slightly longer version, which is confusingly called a short practice of green Tara, this is the slightly longer version, we have the glance meditation on the graduated path. So of some of those themes that we've been looking at, do you want to unpack any of them or clarify any of those pieces? Yeah, John.
A bit of a silly one. So when picturing the 3 syllables, and they talk about the arch of light going from Tara's head to our head, I can't help but get caught up in the fact that the light arches have to overlap.
Mm-hmm.
So like when we see that, it's just light moving through light, and you don't worry about the color overlaps and all.
Like, but then it'll be purple.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all light.
Yeah.
All light. Yeah. If any of you missed the Tara class, there's some PowerPoints on that too, kind of what it would look like that might help. But basically, yeah, just arc of light, arc of light, arc of light. First, it's one by one, and then at the end, all 3 simultaneously. And really think whenever there's light in the practice, and every part of the visualization is light, that it's very like a quite solid rainbow. Yeah, quite solid rainbow where it's very transparent. You can see right through it, but the colors are vivid and apparent. And important with all of it for it to have the sense of realness. So if it feels too in the realm of imagination, use a beam of light you have seen in your life, just like coming through the crack of the door, the sunshine, big beam of light. And then imagine if it were blue, what would that be like? If you've been at a very cool laser show, rave or something, I don't know, right? Like, I'm dating myself now, but yes. Do you still have raves nowadays? Like, anyway, yeah, still with fun colors and lights. Yeah, Rio knows. They're pretty lights. It helps the visualization. Yeah, and with all of it, like the amount of detail you can hold is sometimes when you're getting a good affinity and a good level of merit with a certain practice, because it might be a weird thing where you could visualize Tara very clearly in all of her details, holding them all perfectly in the space in front. And then you switch to like Medicine Buddha, who you've maybe seen just as often, but the details won't come clear. And you think, well, that's weird. I thought a faculty of visualization was a faculty of visualization that I could easily swap. And maybe it's familiarization, but it's actually more than familiarization. It's also merit. So sometimes you'll find that a visualization you've been struggling with for a lot of years, you'll kind of get a critical mass with it, and then suddenly it will be clear in all details and you're surprised at yourself. And some it comes clear right away. So the point is not the clarity per se, it's coming back to the intention for it to be clear and the sense of it being real. Those 2 things are more important than how many details actually show up. So that's kind of an interesting one to play with too, because you might find that as you go between different practices. Some of them, it's just clear as day, just as if you were picturing your bedroom at home and all the things on your bedside table in elaborate detail. No problem, bing, there's Tara, just that clear. And for some things, it's like a haze of light, and you're like, anyway. So a lot of reasons go into that. The important thing is to not squeeze the mind, but also don't let it be contented with it just being a vague haze. See if you can get some details to sharpen, because that will help. Like I mentioned in the last retreat, one of the big benefits of lower tantra, like this green Tara practice, is that you're developing calm abiding and special insight simultaneously. So that's a hard skill, and it starts as an alternating skill, but it's a lot more efficient to do it in the tantric context than in the sutra context. Harder, but faster. Yeah. Other questions about the practice, or yeah.
I have two follow-on questions about those things where you sort of implied, and I don't know if you meant to, that if you have an affiliation with deity X or deity Y, and if you visualize one easier, should you be focusing on that? Should that be a practice more, or the one that you can't see? Is there?
In terms of shoulds and shouldn'ts, I wouldn't worry so much about that, but in terms of like affinity and familiarity from past lives,
Yeah,
that sometimes is why a certain Buddha is clearer than another.
okay.
You have some sort of affinity or some sort of practice in previous lives, which, yeah, it makes sense that you can kind of ride the coattails of your previous work. Might as well stick with that one, unless for some reason your life seems to be mandating that you do a bit of a pivot. So you can use your own wisdom with that. You can ask your teachers, what should be my practice, but I think that also we can kind of follow our own intuition about it as well.
That's helpful. And then a clarifying question about the light. I think it's Bob Thurman who refers to it now as light, but as plasma. I think of it.
That's so Bob Thurman. Yeah.
And I was wondering if you would.
Yeah, and Bob Thurman is amazing, and I respect him so much. Plasma conveys that more present sense that we want it to have, right? Like this is a real living thing.
Yeah.
And also the brightness of plasma. Like if you saw a volcano and the plasma rolling through, just that incredible vividness. Sometimes they say it's like the sunlight hitting a snow mountain, that bright glare, that glare you get bouncing off of snow. We might say in modern days, like a car with its headlights on high beam, like it's bright light.
Oh.
It's bright.
Oh.
Yeah. So despite it being transparent, it's very bright.
Okay.
And the brighter you make it, the more awake you'll stay. So that's also helpful. And I think Bob Thurman's saying plasma also has a helpful connotation, which relates to if your mind is prone to scattering and excitement, plasma has a sense of weight.
Oh.
Yeah, so you still want to think of it as completely transparent in the sense of non-material, but having some sort of like hard to describe weight to it, which adds that sense of realness. And also having that sense of weight keeps your mind from flying off. And sometimes when you're visualizing, I don't know if anyone else has this, but the image will be kind of there and then it'll like change sizes or it'll move or something weird will happen, right? And so if you have a sense of weight, it's more likely to hold still, right? So a moving image is more related to a distracted, excited mind. A blurry image is usually related to kind of a more heavy, sleepy mind, so brighten it up. So these are techniques that you find even in the sutra tradition when you're meditating on Shakyamuni Buddha as your object of shamatha in the space in front. To have it bright, vivid, and with a sense of weight prevents both dullness and agitation. So you bring those same ideas to Tantra, but there's an elevated meaning in Tantra. So plasma, yeah, go Bob. It just sounds funny, but yeah, go Bob. Right. Yeah, there was someone online.
Sorry about that. I had to figure out how to unmute because I have both my computer and I have it on the phone. My question was about this root guru. I always have a hard time figuring out who that is. I'm sure it's the person I took the vows with, retreat vows, but I don't really have a being that I consider to be my Lama, my guru. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the root guru is concept, and we get a little bit too ordinary about it, like we're choosing who we're going to marry or something, like this is the one, right? And really, when you take an influence from is one of your root gurus, right?
Okay.
So you have gurus. Now, your root guru, for lack of a better word, is the one that moves your mind towards Dharma the most efficiently. But it might be that some move your mind towards the Dharma in a certain topic, and then another one moves your mind towards the Dharma in another topic. And what we're talking about with the Guru Buddha is that aspect of the outside world that marries up with your inner wisdom and creates a bridge. So the root guru doesn't even have to be a person. It's just that the person was a catalyst for that inner conversation where you felt your own wisdom develop. So you know that wisdom, it wasn't just you talking to yourself. It needed an outside input, but it was your ability to recognize wisdom and that outside kind of karmic affinity meeting each other. So I think it's really, really useful if you're not really clear on what is the guru and what is the root guru, to read the prayer calling the guru from afar again and again, especially the long version especially. And at the very end of that long version of calling the guru from afar, there's a verse that says, "Please bless me to meet the ultimate definitive guru, the bare face of my innate mind, with the coverings of existence and perceiving it as true removed." And there's a lot to be delved into from that. And there's many pages before you get to that point. So indeed, there's a flesh and blood, sweet human of good qualities, ethics, 3 principal aspects of the path, 3 higher trainings, qualities superior to your own, superior ethics, all that kind of stuff, who helped you meet and connect with the tantric path. They are one of your root gurus. But the more you develop, the more mature the relationship becomes, and more it becomes an inner conversation with you and the divine. But it has to start as a person what you met once. But hopefully it's a person what you've met many, many times before you took an empowerment from them. You know, it's good.
Sure. So what I hear from that too is my root guru can be Tara.
Your root guru is Tara.
Is Tara.
And the person what gave you the Tara empowerment is part of what you're relating to when you think of Tara.
Okay.
But your root guru might also be Medicine Buddha, and your root guru might also be Manjushri. Like, don't get too trapped in form. When we say the guru hyphen Buddha, something very important is being conveyed there. Yeah. The Guru Buddha is something very essential to understand, but it takes a lot of your own sitting with what does it mean to learn? How is learning accomplished? And more than learning, how are things integrated? And what are the ingredients of that, both outer and inner? And how do I orchestrate that meeting of minds? So I'll use a sadhana like this, the sadhana of green Tara, as the way to orchestrate that meeting of minds. But I have to have met something outside of myself, as well as having met something inside of myself. And there to be some sort of bridge or formula or recipe to tie those two together. And this is where we understand why Buddhism at its root is non-sectarian and at its root is non-denominational, because we recognize that what we call Dharma doesn't even have to be trapped into Buddhism. Any form of orchestrated is a spiritual path that we see as worthwhile if its basis is ethics and the goal is elevated loving kindness and compassion. And so the enlightened mind is going to manifest in a million different ways according to the needs of various disciples. So for us, it's manifesting as Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and teachers of certain types. For other religions, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are manifesting as teachers of those traditions. And you'll notice that the great world traditions that are stable have non-harmfulness and kindness at their root, even if their practitioners misbehave. Right? But the tenets of said religions are very similar in terms of behavior.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. What if you've got many teachers and do they keep hopping seats? You know,
or are they like merging into being other teachers and people, okay.
It's a good question. I think that what you're trying to understand is what is the essential quality in all of them that is able to get to you, and something that's beyond all of those individuals and those individual personalities that's able to reach you. And so on your cushion, you might pick the one that represents the quality of that deity the most for you, or you might think they all merge into one because later in the sadhana, they all do. And plus all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of all the 10 directions all merge into Tara, who is one thing, but is anything one thing? There's nothing on earth that is one thing. And yet we have to label and live in this conventional world and say this is one cup, but a cup is not one thing, is it? Yeah, it's labeled in dependence upon countless parts. So to everything else that exists. So, from a distance, you can say that's Tara, that's one Buddha. But really, Tara is not one thing, nor was she one person. But we could pick a folk story and say this one person practitioner is the representative of that archetypal energy that we all seek to embody. But she wasn't the first or the last. And all enlightened minds can manifest in that way. But we could pick one and say, yeah, that's Tara. And that would be true. It's just there's always more layers. So there's history version, there's folk story version, there's archetypal version, there's guru version, and then there's your own Buddha nature growing into all of that. And if you can bring all of those ideas together and merge them into this one shape that you recognize as still appearing while empty, you're going in the right direction. And that's why, we do this deep analysis in a classroom setting, in a discussion setting, lots of reading, lots of thought. But then when you get to the practice, Tantra practice is gently analytical. Gently analytical.
Gently analytical.
Right, as opposed to the sutra tradition, which in a way is kind of aggressively analytical, or very much pulling things apart, hair splitting, details, specifics. When you get to Tantra, when you actually get into the practice, you only do as much analysis as needed to become a catalyst for that point in the practice. So for example, if you're meditating in a sutra way, to meditate on emptiness requires a whole outline with a series of bullet points and logics and reasonings. Having done that again and again and again, you get to the Tantra path and it just says, Swavavashuddha Sawadhamma, Swavavashuddha Hom, all is empty. And if you don't immediately go into whatever your understanding of emptiness is, you give yourself a couple beats of analysis to trigger it and then rest there. And then out of emptiness arises this or arises that. So you can't say either or. You had to have done some sutra meditation for Tantra meditation to work. And if you're kind of going into Buddhism, might as well cut to the chase, go straight to the end, jump into Tantra, having not done a lot of sutra, you can kind of tidy it up as you go and be like, all right, well, I started at the end. Now I need to shore up the foundations, shore them up. That's fine. And that's very Tibetan Buddhist anyway, right? Start at the end and then backfill, right? Because sometimes it's the beauty and it's the exoticness or it's the archetypalness that draws us to Buddhism, and it's the beautiful sights and sounds and the images that bring us in. For some people, the simplicity of something like Zen is what brought them in, and then later they find a need for elaboration. And so it's not like a hierarchy of what is correct. It's like they are all correct, and then you have to just make micro adjustments according to your needs as a practitioner. Yeah. So it takes a while to kind of get the lay of the land with Buddhism, but once you get a general sense of it, then it's much easier to drill down into certain areas and really build depth with a lot of intention. In the beginning, you're just trying to figure out where everything fits, and it can feel like a lot. And sometimes when you get to your practice, you get this kind of overwhelmed feeling of there's so much I could be doing on the cushion. I don't even know where to start. And you're kind of paralyzed with the paralysis of being overwhelmed. There's a million things I could do. There's a million things I should do. Maybe not. Maybe I won't. Okay, bye. It can happen. But a way to approach it is just to remember sometimes just reading the practice as written has a great deal of meaning to it, even without study. just from your good common sense, from your imprints, reading something slowly, you're going to be able to connect with a lot of meaning just on the surface of it. And then with more repetition, even more depth will be accumulated. And then with more repetition, you'll start to see, okay, here is where I'm stuck, or here is where I need more teachings. And then you can intentionally seek teachings of that type. So you become more strategic about your practice, and you can use one beautiful practice as your mainstay forever if you want to, once you find one that really feels like home, or a couple that feel like home. But, don't let the feeling of, I know so much more than I can actually practice, make you paralyzed about your practice. That's a normal stage, that you understand way more than you can do. Yeah, I mean, that's life in general, isn't it? We understand way more than we can do. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's sharpened the horns of the dilemma, or if that has made it more confusing. Or both. Or neither. Yeah. In this particular practice, as you're going through any of the words or any of the passages, do you find any points kind of intriguing you'd like to hear more about, or any parts kind of troubling that seem kind of odd?
Yeah, well, the mudras. I don't know what those look like.
The middle Tara, the greenest one on your card. And then like, yep, with the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, method and wisdom combined. But you don't even have to make, those mudras, right? You're just thinking of them. Right? And then the other one's sublime realizations, or boon granting. Boon granting. It's not a normal word we use, is it? Boon granting. When we're thinking about the mudras of Tara, in a way, mudras or hand gestures are just a way of being able to identify one Buddha from another, or what they're particularly emphasizing. It's good to learn the basic ones, just so you're kind of clear when you're looking, especially at statues who may not have the color on them, right? Be like, oh, that's Tara. Oh, that's white Tara. Oh, that's green Tara, even though they're both gold, because it's a statue. You can tell because of the mudras and what their feet and hands are doing. That's useful. And they do convey certain things. When you get deeper into Tantra, you learn about the subtle energy system and what channels are connected to what parts of the fingers and what parts of everything. And it's a really interesting exploration of the subtle body. So then the mudras are even more important. But at this stage, it's kind of just a means of identification at this stage. Yeah. And sometimes it helps. You'll find in longer sadhanas, especially, where there's a huge amount of detail in the visualization, like much more than this, right? This visualization, like on page 7, is what, a paragraph, and then another paragraph, and then we add some syllables. Like the Yamataka Sadhana, for example, just describing what he looks like and what he's wearing and what he's holding, pages and pages and pages, right? Right. Unless you're just like reading the short one and it's like 16 legs. And you're like, all right, evidently. Right. But they'll tell all this detail, and each of the details are symbolic of a part of the path. And it becomes this amazing mind map for you to hold all of these amazing teachings you've already met in the sutra tradition, and anchoring them into image does something different than it does when you're just holding it in memory in general. And then when you're adding a verbalization, and you're adding like a tactile experience of holding the mala, when you're adding all of your senses in, there are shifts that happen more swiftly just because of that. So there'll sometimes be a section after you finish the visualization called Minding the Symbolism. It's even sometimes got a nice heading that says Minding the Symbolism. And so you just kind of are doing a tour of your own visualization and remembering what bits mean. And some of the bits you don't know what they mean, and some of them you remember. But this minding the symbolism part is a really excellent way of, again, developing calm abiding and special insight simultaneously, but also more deeply connecting with the iconography of the deity and kind of making friends with it. So Tara, for example, has like 3 necklaces and like bracelets and anklets and all of these scarves. And in general, we can say that all represents the 6 perfections, which we love. right? Generosity, ethics, patience, joyous effort, concentration, wisdom. We love those guys. They're our old friends. Yay, 6 perfections. So she's not just wearing jewelry, right? Like it's got a meaning, it's got a purpose, and it can anchor your mind on those teachings you've already had about those beautiful things. Does it sort of make sense, right? Yeah.
I never thought of it that way. I've been taught that way, so thank you.
Sure, yeah, no, there's layers and layers, you know, whenever you think you got to the bottom of it with Tantra, but wait, there's more. But part of it is that you could do the same practice every day and build depth every single day with it and never run out of profundity, you know, and it helps your mind to have a project, if we're honest, right?
Yeah.
Right? Like focusing on one simple image again and again is good for us. It develops shamatha. But if we want to develop it more swiftly and conjoin it with special insight, having the image plus what the image means sometimes can make it go more swiftly because we already multitask so much in the modern world. So instead of fighting against that, we use it. We're using our powers for good. Normally, our multitasking is like, how much work can I get done in a shorter period of time while still being kind of stimulated and slightly entertained with snacks, right? You know, we're like, how much can I get done? How swiftly can I get it done? Can I have music and food and company at the same time and just stimulation? Right. And so instead of saying now I have to drastically change the way my brain is used to and just focus on one thing, we're saying, okay, how about all those powers of multitasking get plugged into something that's a benefit and stabilize there. Sometimes your mind likes it better.
So every time you speak, I have another question.
Sure, yeah.
You kind of like say something that is very rich and then other follow on. So would an appropriate analogy be if you're learning a piano piece and you're starting with like the left hand and then you do the right hand and then you later you pat it, you both and throw it down. You know, and eventually you can play that piece, whatever level. Is it the same kind of, except there's more meaning to it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good analogy. For the guys on Zoom, she was making the analogy of learning to play the piano. Could you hear Karen okay? She was saying, is it similar to like when you're learning to play the piano, first one hand, then the other hand, then you bring it together, it's a little awkward, and then eventually you're able to play the piece and it's beautiful and it eventually becomes effortless, right? Through tons of effort, it becomes effortless. And that is definitely what we're talking about here. It's the same kind of faculty, but for an elevated reason. Absolutely. And good news is if you are a musician or you are an artist or you do something of that type, those faculties of concentration are going to come in handy for this. Yeah, you're just switching it to a different zone. Yeah, so it's not radically different. It's variations on it and it's just elevated. So use that same premise. It takes a lot of effort to become effortless. And that is a quote from my dear teacher, Jetsuma Tenzin Palmo, right? It takes a lot of effort to become effortless.
Oh, hello, Venerable. I'm just curious about I missed about an hour of the last session, but I was curious. So you said that this practice is the slightly longer version, but it's called the short practice. So I'm looking at that. And previously you mentioned you can do the Lam Rim in the morning and then do it again with the purification focus in the evening. So the purification focus in the PDF that I've got means Tara visualized on your head and the rays coming from her 3 places down in an arc into your 3 places. That's the purification you're talking about, is it?
Well, what I'm talking about is in terms of daily practice, in the morning, we emphasize motivation. In the evening, we emphasize purification. But this practice has both in it, whether you do it morning or evening. So what you're doing is giving more energy and time to one section over another with a, kind of an intentional plan for your day. If you were to repeat the practice, you could also use a different practice in the evening than you do in the morning. But if you're wanting to use this as a purification at night, what you might want to do is gently reflect on each of the heading you graduated, not necessarily needing to read it all. And then with the visualization, it's the same. And then refuge and bodhicitta the same. Then at the 7 limb prayer, You do with my body, speech, and mind. I devoutly prostrate, all offerings, both real and imagined. Then when you get to all sins and offenses amassed from beginningless time, I confess, you pause and you develop the power of regret. Yeah. So if this was an evening practice, you would, and we'll do it in that form this evening. So it's coming up, don't worry. But you'll sit and think, okay, today, physically, verbally, mentally, where did I stray? Yeah, where was I not on my path? And just let yourself recognize a fault to be a fault without guilt and shame, without justification and excuses. Just whoops, whoops. Yep, that's the list for the day. Yep. And then probably indicative of habits of the past. Let's confess those. Yep. And also a whole bunch I can't remember. Yep, those. Yep. So you're generating a strong power of regret. And then I rejoice in all the virtuous actions of holy and ordinary beings. Who's the first ordinary being you rejoice in? Yourself. Right. So that is more cringy for us. We're very good at thinking how we're crap, right? But if you can take a minute and go, where did I stay on my path? Physically, verbally, mentally. Yeah, like I was nice to that one guy. I helped that little lizard like get free of the fence or whatever you did that was kind, right? Physically. Verbally, how did you speak kindly and truthfully and skillfully to others? Like, let yourself notice that and be happy, because we're nice folks, right? Like, let that have its own momentum. And Lama Zopa Rinpoche and other teachers would say the practice of rejoicing maximizes your merit. Yeah, so you have the good karma you created. By rejoicing in it, you make it more. Yeah, and then you go on to rejoice in other ordinary beings in your life and all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, etc. And then you finish the 7-limb prayer at a normal speed, finish the practice at a normal speed. And the purification visualization part, you might want to give a little bit more space and time to at the end of the day. Yeah. And then before you get to the dedication, you add the power of resolve. And power of resolve is just the very time-specific practical promises to yourself. What can you change? And that way the practice has all 4 opponent powers complete. So
thank you very much.
Yeah, definitely. So refuge is already embedded in the practice, so you don't have to worry about adding it. And remedy is already embedded in the practice. That's the visualization and the mantra, so you don't have to worry about adding it. So if it was an evening practice, that's how it goes. That's an excellent practice for nighttime. Ria was saying she does a little rejoicing, like kind of in her last thoughts before sleepy time, and it's brilliant. Yeah. Dedication thoughts or rejoicing thoughts before bed are like the best thoughts before bed. Like all of the good that was done today might go towards enlightenment, clunk. Or here's the good things I got up to, my friends got up to, my coworkers got up to, that were done in the world. Oh, that's wonderful, clunk. Yep, those are actually the best thoughts to have at night.
I have a bigger picture question. I'm not sure how you can articulate it, so I will try. How to integrate blessings and prayers and other things they all depend on other things that they do exist and karma and conditions versus karma, and I know that we're not supplicating to ask for candy or Christmas presents, but we still are supplicating and they have an influence on our life. And sometimes it seems to get very scientific, and other times it's very mystical. And I just struggle with that.
Yeah, the question about blessings is a really good one. And what are we beseeching and what does that do? And all of those questions are, I think, really important. And, the quick answer is a blessing is that which transforms the mind. What is it that transforms the mind? There's a lot of practical scientific things like repetition and critical mass, for lack of a better word, is what can shift something from an understanding to a behavior, or make something that was fabricated into something that becomes spontaneous. Yeah, something that was contrived becomes uncontrived. Right. Like when you practice the piano, right? Like you really have to think about every note and where your fingers go until you don't. Yeah. And once you really know the piece, you don't have to think about it. You're just in the flow state. Right. But if something distracts you, you suddenly have to kind of go back into, oh, this chord, that chord. Right. But if you're in the flow state, it just comes. You don't have to think about it. So a blessing is one of the conditions that helps something shift from head to heart. And part of the beseeching is opening yourself up to the wish for that, which is a conversation you're having with yourself for the most part. So if you're saying to yourself, I want to be more loving. Love is very important. I want to give love more easily. I want to receive love more easily. I want both of those directions to be free from attachment. Yes, who's with me? All right, both directions, this way and this way. Less attachment, more love. Yay, go team. You already believe that. You already want that. By saying that to yourself, it brings it to the forefront of your mind, which means that all your little receptors, whether they be your nervous system or your mirror neurons or your mind itself, which is immaterial, or any number of things, they're looking for input that's going to help move that along. It's looking for ammunition to help move that along, or fuel to help move that along, whether that be direct teachings or indirect teachings, meaning things that have come to you specifically as Dharma, or things you've decided to make Dharma from your own wisdom, how to reframe this or use that. So by activating, I want this, please help me with this, you're becoming open and receptive to all of the hope that's already there, all of that help that the Buddhas are kind of wanting to offer, but also just your own openness is the main thing. Becoming receptive is the main thing.
Yeah, I guess I still struggle a little bit with, well, you said that Buddhas have to offer. So how do the Buddhas really have anything to do? So if I could be a pure scientific view, I can sit in my little box and I can do it by myself.
Theoretically, but wouldn't science say that you need some sort of external input to move you along with some sort of developmental stage?
Disagree with you guys.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
understand how how if we say it's really internal, I would like to be enlightened, whatever that's my path. How do the Buddhists help me?
How do the Buddhists help is a very good question.
Yeah.
How do the Buddhists help? And how the Buddhists help is a very hidden phenomena, and I can't give you a satisfying answer probably.
Okay, I just wanted.
Yeah.
There is an element in there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But definitely there's an element of please help. But the thing is that the enlightened mind is helping whether we ask or not. Beneficial conditions are around whether we decide to see them as so or not. What we're really doing is a mental exercise to lean into what stimulates growth.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right. And so it becomes a more empowered position in Buddhism, because what you're really saying is, I get to decide when I'm a student. I get to decide when I learn something. But also, I could learn something from anything, whether that anything is trying to teach me or not. So let's assume it is. Let's assume the outside world is pervaded by the enlightened mind that wants to show me something about myself and life in general and how to be wiser and kinder. Let's assume that it is. But even if it isn't, I could decide to make it so. And either way, the learning happens. But if you're leaning into what if it's true that something's reaching back, then you start to have more experiences of the uncanny and the unexpected and things that are in resonance with there is more going on than just me and my little thoughts in my head. Something seems to be reaching back. And so it's an experiment that you kind of play with. But the first thing is just talking to yourself and saying, may I be open to the conditions that stimulate growth. By saying that, I become so just because I've reminded myself.
I guess it makes it a personal thing. I like the idea that the people around me want to help me. And so even if I don't really actually ask them, no, don't understand whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not really, but I like the idea that they're helping.
Yeah.
And when it gets really scientific, that to me is not very interesting. It just seems warm and loving over here.
Yeah.
So
some days science is going to help you, some days mysticism is going to help you. And I don't think it's an either or, right? It's a both and. And, right brain, left brain, immaterial mind, all these things. Like, I think we need a lot of angles to say the same exact things again and again, right? Which is that we are social animals and we need loving kindness and compassion. We are fundamentally interconnected, but despite that, feel all alone. Science agrees, Buddhism agrees. Many methods to break free of the prison of feeling alone, many different techniques to feeling connection. But what we're wanting and what we're needing is echoed in many different areas. And I think there's something to be investigated there. What I used to always say to my psychology friends when I taught in Israel was, I think that psychology techniques help build connections. They build connections between yourself and other people. They build connections between yourself and your past and understanding yourself. And I think they're incredibly vital. Buddhism, I think, reveals the connections being already there. So which do you need? Depends on the day. Building connections or revealing connections? Because Buddhism would say whether you feel connected or not, you are. So peel back the layers so you can see the truth of it. Yeah.
That's fundamentally what we're really trying to do.
Yeah.
But it's just so hard to see.
Yeah, look, and you make it big and grand and esoteric, and then you bring it down small and personal and everyday. And then, it's always like this with the spiritual path, where it goes very complicated and then it goes very simple. Then the simple goes deeper and it needs to get more complicated. And, it's this pivot back and forth, because we're going to just keep arriving at the point of life is wisdom and compassion. But why and how? What does that look like? When? All of that becomes very complicated and specific to the moment, unique to the individual, but then you land back at the same simple point. So some days you need a lot of details and some days you don't need many at all, but it's asking yourself what's going to make the heart respond. Yeah. Sometimes the heart is like, puppy, love, done, right? That's all you needed. Right? Some days you have to read Nagarjuna, depends, right? Right? So, yeah, it's interesting. So I think that sometimes what happens with our frustration with the Dharma is that sometimes on a day we need a simple truth. We wind up coming across a very detailed explanation. And some days when we want a very detailed explanation, we get something that feels too simplistic. And so we're out of resonance with what the outside world is feeding us, which is why the training is to decide everything is personal advice, whether simple or elaborate. If you take it personally, it's going to go in. So what does this mean for me if all the Buddhas of all 10 directions have decided to manifest here and now in this space for me with all of the things I'm interacting with? What are they trying to say to me about my life? And adopting that attitude, it feels more and more true. But if you adopt that attitude without enough grounding, you start to feel crazy, right? And you start over-interpreting, like, why orange flowers? Buddhas, what do you mean by the orange flowers? They could have been white flowers, but you could also decide, oh, orange, that reminds me of Manjushri from last time. That means I shouldn't forget the wisdom part. Useful, but don't take it too literally, is the fact that they're orange coming from the Buddhas? Or is it coming from Liz who bought them at the store? Or both, right? Like, well, what? Like, you can get really nutty about it. Or you could just decide to make it a teaching and then really feel confidence in your own Buddha nature maturing. So the outside world meeting the inside world is something infinitely elaborate, because what is inside and what is outside? On the physical realm, that's a little easier. But even with a little bit of investigation, that becomes more abstract, doesn't it? Like the temperature of the room that we're experiencing right now would be slightly less if there was one less of us here or one more of us here. I feel like this is my temperature, I made it. No, not so. So these practices, I think when you do them, just see what happens if you do them as written. But do them slowly, like read one line and think, well, what does that mean? Explain it back to yourself. Let it connect. Read another line. What does that mean? Think about it. Make it your own. Let it land. you know, and it might be that you do that slow way with just one section and then do the rest of it at a nice speed that makes sense to you. And then gradually you work your way through the practice month after month, and eventually the whole thing feels very rich and very alive and personal to you. Yeah. So, you know, when you get a lot of empowerments of Kriya Tantra, usually the only commitment is to do the mantra itself. Sometimes not even that. Always it will come with Bodhisattva vows, which you can read ahead of time and make sure you like before you take them. Bodhisattva vows are beautiful, but what happens is that when you have a lot of these lower Tantra empowerments is that you might not do this whole sadhana every single day. You might only do one of them really deeply, and then the rest of them you just kind of touch. But probably even now you could do a very gentle version of this practice off book. You could think refuge, sit with that. Bodhicitta, sit with that. Tara is here, purifying body, purifying speech, purifying mind. Om Tari Tutari Turi Soha, Om Tari Tutari Turi Soha. She dissolves and absorbs, dedicate. Done, right? You could go off book already. Yeah, if you wanted to. You know. Okay. Other questions?
Off book, so could you elaborate on
Book. Off book. Book.
I've heard that, you know, at a certain point, there's a point where you don't really use the words, and especially the English words that are very
Wordy.
and, you know, the part of it connects you, and when you're telling them off, you don't even know what it means, but it feels more real. Is there a certain point where you can focus all the time?
You know, it depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? So you can go off book in the sense of not necessarily reading sadhana if what you're wanting to emphasize is just the visualization and the mantra. You know, basically all practices you motivate with refuge and bodhicitta. You end with dedicating, remember emptiness. In the middle is up to you. And, you know, these bits of elaboration are all to help you develop merit or purify the mind. But some days you got more energy than others. And, you know, I would say if you did Tara practice every single day, some days you do the gentle, just refuge, bodhicitta, visualize, mantra, dedicate. Some days you go through it slowly, you go through every single section, you really give it a lot of time and energy. Yeah, other days you do some like really long rim emphasize, the rest of it quick, but it's like every day you're doing Tara. And then you're really asking yourself, what's my need? What's my energy level? What do I have space for? What's going to be the launching pad for my day? You know, what's going to really help me bring out the best in myself and others? So it's the pattern of reconnection that's really important here. And, you know, consistency and continuity is really, really important. But you don't have to feel trapped by needing to stay in the structure of the text like this. It's just keep the essential pieces. And then when you have mental space for elaboration, go for it, because it's going to build your concentration. It's going to build your merit and purification, but you don't have to feel trapped by it, you know? Yeah. And with any of the bits that don't look like prayers, also don't feel like you need to say them out loud. Whenever you say Dharma texts out loud, it helps purify your speech. So we have a tradition of saying absolutely everything out loud. But when you're by yourself, you know, you can just look at and think, look at and think. You look at the visualization, you don't even need to read the whole thing. You might just have the picture there, which is the same as what's written there, you know, and if you're a more visual person, you're just like, yep. Yep. And yep. You know, right? Obviously without the sound effects, unless they help, right? And then you do the prayers out loud for the sake of purifying verbal karma, for the sake of generating verbal merit, using a different part of your brain, if you will. But then this purification section can be all in your head, all in your mind. Yeah, request, visualize, at the speed that feels really nice for you. Yeah.
Well, like, question, in terms of saying things out loud, I really like that practice. I like to say everything out loud.
Yeah, rock on.
But doesn't it also like if there are spirits that we can't necessarily perceive around us, then hearing it or being around it, and both, whatever that has some merit to it as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of benefits to saying it out loud for the sake of being seen and unseen. Absolutely. Creates imprints for them. It really, it's up to you what's going to move your heart. Definitely nice to say things out loud, but it can be really a learning style thing. Like some people really are more verbal and some people are a lot more visual and some people are more tactile, really kind of go with what your mind seems to need that day. And if you're just like a default verbalizer, run with it, right? Like it's a good thing. Like none of it is good or bad in and of itself. I think what can happen is that if you're used to saying things, sometimes you can start to say them very, very quickly and then lose the essence. But sometimes if you only visualize, you can skip over very important words that have a lot of significance. So really whatever your approach is, just make sure you're engaged with it, that it's not a passive thing, that you're really engaged with the heart of the meaning of it all, whether it's verbally or visualizing or both. Yeah, that's the only danger with repetition, is that it gets taken for granted and you're just so used to it, it just right, and it's kind of going through the motions. Yeah, but yeah, certainly being seen and unseen, like to hear you talk about Dharma, and it's good imprints for them. And if you have a cat sitting on your lap during your meditation, good for the cat, right? Sometimes they're like, shut up. Yeah, with the dogs. Yeah,
The unseen beings read our mind.
So can unseen beings read our minds? Some of them have little clairvoyance. Some of them have a lot of clairvoyance. Some of them are up to no good. Some of them are very helpful, just like people's is, because they are just sentient beings that were reborn in the spirit realm. So they won't be there forever. If you have a sense of them being in the room, don't give it too much energy, because it's hard for us to tell if they're mischievous or not. So there's just a kind of a blanket advice that Tibetan Buddhist lamas usually give, which is if you feel that there are like hungry ghosts or spirit realm beings around, is you wish them well and then disengage and come back to your practice. Like don't give it energy, like pretend that they were kids playing across the street, kind of be like, something. Anyway.
Is it better to avoid those spaces if they're not,
Is it better to avoid those spaces? I think you have to take it case by case. Take it case by case. If it feels like you're really not welcome there and there's really a lot of hostileness, sometimes you can ask some Sangha member or something to do a clearing. Or if you have to, like if it's a new house and you have to live there, you can ask them to do a clearing.
No, I was thinking like somewhere in that's quite a while ago, and it was a good church where I just did not like the room, but the other room over here was something like that, where
where you're getting bad vibes.
Yeah, with that vibe.
Yeah, bad vibes. Yeah, I think that regardless of if it's good vibes or bad vibes, I think you just kind of wish them well, like may you be at peace, and then disengage. And I think if you have the sense I should leave, leave. Okay. Yeah. But the important thing is not to give it too much energy, because that can kind of attract it more. Yeah. And I know some people love mediums and love spirit world stuff, and it's really enriching for their life, and they may have a level of some sort of facility with control and whatever channeling stuff, but I feel like it's playing with fire unless you have a lot of grounding in other things. And living in Dharma centers all of my adult life, you meet a lot of people who have come across some dodgy stuff with the best of intentions, and it's made them have a bit of psychosis. So it's better to just kind of like, I don't know if that's my imagination or if it's true. Either way, go in peace anyway. Yeah, don't give it energy. Yeah. And I wouldn't go to spiritualism circles and stuff, because you might get an amazing practitioner who can see all sorts of things, or you might get one that's kind of tuning into something a bit not helpful or not healthy, and it's hard to predict. So I would not give it a lot of energy. Yeah. Also can make you superstitious. So wish them well. I mean, Kajula was so beautiful once when someone was asking her this question. They were asking, what's the best clearing technique? What's the best sort of, like moving bad vibes out of an area technique? Which practice should I use? And she was like, just meditate on compassion. Right? If you're looking for some like fancy thing with the drums and the cymbals and the incense and whatever, and meditate on compassion. Yeah. Right, well, shall we do the practice? And this session, we're going to do the Tara praises as well. So you want to have it kind of ready to go. We're going to do the Tara praises right before the mantra. And for you guys with the hard copy, it's quite easy. You've got a tab, but not the one we did for lunch, but just a page over. So for you guys on the PDF, it's the PDF page 15. It says the praises, oh, my prostrate to the noble transcendent liberator. If you want to kind of have that ready to go, we'll plug that in before the mantra time. And you can, quite quickly scroll to it as well, but just so you're kind of alerted to that's going to happen. So we'll start at the beginning of the practice with the glance meditation on the graduated path, but we'll do this in a more abbreviated way than we did this morning. Okay, so just coming back to your posture and coming back to your body. And then shifting your focus to either the breath or a mental image, just to let surface distractions settle. Just a couple minutes of single pointedness. And a glance meditation on the graduated path. I'll just read straight through. I take refuge in the Holy Guru, essence of all Buddhas, original grantor of all holy teachings, and Lord of all supreme beings. Please, Guru Buddhas, bestow on me the ability to unify my mind with the Dharma and be successful in practicing Dharma, in order to achieve the graduated path. May no hindrances occur while achieving this path. Please bless me to realize that I've received a perfect human rebirth, which is highly meaningful for many reasons, difficult to obtain, but perishable, transient, and fragile, decaying in the shortest moment because of its changeable nature. Thus, my death is definite, but its actual time is most indefinite. And after death, I'm far more likely to be reborn in the lower suffering realms, having created infinitely more negative than positive karma in this life and all previous lives. Please bless me to comprehend how incredibly unendurable is the suffering of the lower realms, that I might take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha with all my heart, and realize the evolution of karma in all its profundity, that I might perform only virtuous actions and abandon all negative creations. By practicing in this way, I will be reborn in the upper realms, but I will still have to experience unlimited samsaric suffering because of uncontrolled delusion and karma. Please bless me to realize fully the evolution of samsara, from uncontrolled rebirth to death to rebirth, and to follow day and night the three higher trainings of the path: higher conduct, higher concentration, and higher wisdom, which are the main methods to release me from samsara. But as each sentient being has been my mother, and as most of them are in extreme suffering, please bless me to bring success to all by renouncing the perfect happiness of self and practicing the Bodhisattva's deeds of the six perfections, with a Bodhisattva's mind of exchanging self with others, on the basis of the equanimity meditation. Thus I shall have no sorrow in experiencing the samsaric sufferings of all other sentient beings, for no matter how long, having trained my mind in the general path. Please bless me to follow the quick Vajrayana teachings by feeling sentient beings suffering very unimaginably unbearable for even the shortest moment as my own, and to achieve the attainment of keeping my ordinations and the instructions of the Guru with the best and highest care in life for the sole purpose of enlightening all sentient beings. So letting the mind connect with all three scopes. Above the crown of my head, I visualize a lotus and moon disk. Upon these is the great treasury of compassion, Aryatara, mother of all enlightened beings, who is oneness with my kind root Guru. My Guru is seated in the full lotus position within a transparent bubble of rainbow-colored light, is pink in complexion, and wears saffron robes and a pandit's hat. His right hand is at his heart in the gesture of teaching the Dharma, and holds a vajra and stem of a white lotus that blooms beside his right ear. His left hand rests on his hip. It holds a bell and the stem of another white lotus that blooms beside his left ear. At my Guru's heart is Aryatara in female aspect, green in color and seated in the dancing posture within a rainbow bubble. Her left leg is bent up and her right leg is outstretched. Her left hand is at her heart in the mudra symbolizing the triple gem and holding the stem of a blued polyflower. Her right hand extended over her right knee is in the mudra of granting sublime realization. She is beautifully adorned with jeweled ornaments and scarves, and at her 3 places bears the syllables Om Ah Hum. At her heart is a lotus and moon seat, on which stands a radiant green syllable Tum. Rays of green light radiate in all directions from the tongue and invoke all the enlightened beings of the 10 directions. They are all absorbed into Aryatara and become one. And we think, please remain above my head until I receive enlightenment. And over the page, refuge in bodhicitta. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merit from giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. With my body, speech, and mind, I devoutly prostrate. I offer all offerings, both real and imagined. All sins and offenses amassed from beginningless time I confess. I rejoice in all virtuous actions of holy and ordinary beings. O Gurus and Buddhas, please remain until samsara ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. All my virtues and those of all others I dedicate to the great enlightenment. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. The objects of my attachment, aversion, and ignorance, friends, enemies, and strangers, and my body, wealth, and enjoyments. Without any sense of loss, I offer this collection. Please accept it with pleasure and bless me with freedom from the 3 poisons. Please bless me to purify all obscurations of my body, so that it will become one in essence with Guru Tara's holy Vajrabhati. White light emanates from the Om at Aryatara's brow and curves in an arc to enter my brow. My body is purified completely of all obscurations and becomes one in essence with Guru Tara's holy Vajrabhati. Please bless me to purify all obscurations of my speech, so that it becomes one in essence with Guru Tara's holy Vajra speech. Red light emanates from the Ah at Aryatara's throat and curves in an arc to enter my throat. My speech is purified completely of all obscurations and becomes one in essence with Guru Tara's holy Vajra speech. Please bless me to purify all obscurations of my mind, so that it will become one in essence with Guru Tara's holy Vajra mind. Blue light emanates from the womb at Aryatara's heart and curves in an arc to enter my heart. My mind is purified of all obscurations and becomes one in essence with Guru Tara's holy Vajra mind. Please bless me to purify all delusions and subtle obscurations to omniscience, so that my body, speech, and mind will become one with Guru Tara's holy body, speech, and mind. Now 3 colored beams emanate simultaneously from the Om, Ah, and Hum syllables, curving in an arc and entering my 3 places, completely purifying all my delusions and subtle obscurations to omniscience. My body, speech, and mind become one in essence with Guru Tara's holy body, speech, and mind. My root Guru dissolves into Aryatara, who melts into green light, which flows into me. Instantly, my wrong conceptions that I and all other phenomena are self-existent, together with my dualistic mind and its view, disappear, becoming completely empty. Not even a trace of them remains. I concentrate one-pointedly in this empty state, with the wisdom that is indistinguishably one with Guru Tara's blissful, omniscient mind. Then, out of emptiness, wisdom manifests instantly as Aryatara's holy body, seated upon a lotus and moon cushion. At her heart is another lotus and moon, upon which in the center stands the syllable Tam, surrounded in a clockwise direction by the syllables of the mantra, Om Tare Tutare Ture Soha. And then all around her are the 21 emanations of Tara, some red, some yellow, some white, some dark blue, all embodiments of action and protection, stimulating my mind and supporting me with the powers of peace, increase, power, and wrath, exactly in accordance with my needs and the needs of those who I wish to support. So whether you see them clearly or not, feel that the 21 Taras are here and turn to the Tara praises on page 18 of this text. And with each praise, you can think that that Tara dissolves and absorbs into you, blessing your body, speech, and mind. I am I prostrate to the noble transcendent liberator. Homage Tara, swift heroic, eyes like lightning instantaneous, sprung from opening stamens of the Lord of three worlds, tear-born lotus. Homage she whose face combines 100 autumn moons at fullest, blazing with light rays resplendent as 1,000 star collection. Homage golden blue one lotus, water-born and hand-adorned, giving effort calm austerities, patience, meditation, her sphere. Homage crown of Tathagatas, actions triumph withoutly in her, relied on by conquerors' children, having reached every perfection. Homage filling with Tutare, whom desire direction and space, trampling with her feet the 7 worlds, able to draw forth all beings. Homage worship by the all lords, Chakra, Agni, Brahma, Maru, honored by the host of spirits, corpse raises, Gandharvas, Yakshas. Homage with her tray and pay sounds, destroying those magic diagrams, her feet pressing left out right and blazing in a raging fireplace. Homage to a very dreadful, destroyer of Mara's champions. She with frowning lotus visage, who is slayer of all enemies. Homage at the heart her fingers, adorn her with 3 jewel mudra. Light ray rasses all excited, all directions wheels adorn her. Homage see so joyous, radiant, round the midden garlands of light, mirthful laughing with Tutare, subjugating Mara's devas. Homage she able to summon all earth guardians assembly, shaking, frowning with her home sign, saving from every misfortune. Homage crown adorned with crescent, moon all ornaments most shining. Amitabha in her hair now, sending how much light eternal. Homage she mid wreath of blaze like, neon ending fire abiding. Righteous left and joy surrounds you, troops of enemies destroying. Homage she who strikes the ground with her palm and with her foot beats it, scowling with the letter whom the 7 levels she does conquer. Homage happy, virtuous, peaceful, she whose filled is peace nirvana. She endowed with golden soul, destroyer of the great evil. Homage she with joy surrounded, tearing those bodies asunder. Freeze with whom a knowledge mantra, arrangement of the 10 letters. Homage to a received letter of the shape of syllable. 5 foot stamping shakes the 3 worlds, Mero, Mandara, and Vindhya. Homage holding in her hand the hammock moon of Deva lake form, with twice spoken Tara and pain, totally dispelling poison. Homage she who gods and their kings and the kinnaras do honor, armored in a joyful splendor, she dispels bad dreams and conflicts. Homage she whose 2 eyes bright with radiance of sun and full moon, with twice Hara and Tutare, she dispels severe contagion. Homage full of liberating, power by the set of 3 natures, destroys hosts of spirits, yakshas, and brings corpses to Ture. These praises with the mantra, and prostrations thus are 21. Back to page 11. Imagining all those 21 taras dissolved into you, blessed your mind, and remains green tara in the space in front. Light radiates from all the letters of the mantra at her heart, spreading out in every direction. It purifies the negative karmas, gross delusions, and subtle obscurations to omniscience of all sentient beings. Again, light radiates, bearing manifold offerings to the 6 transcendental senses of all the Buddhas and sentient beings. The enlightened beings are extremely pleased by our practice. Shower down the superlative qualities of Buddha Tara's holy body, holy speech, and holy mind. Omniscient wisdom, supreme power, and infinite compassion in the form of a great shower of light rays. As we recite the mantra, we absorb and are blessed by this rain. Om Tareya Ture Soha. 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 Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Soha. Continuing the mantra and the visualization. Om Tare, Tu Tare, Tu Soha. And Tara in the space in front also dissolves into light and absorbs into us, blessing our body, speech, and mind. And we dedicate. May I quickly become Guru Aryatara and lead each and every sentient being into her enlightened state because of these merits. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that is not arisen arise and grow. And may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase. Remembering emptiness and dependent arising. You can relax your attention and we'll have an hour break. And in the next session, we'll do the other version of the Green Tara practice. So if you're looking at the PDF, it's page 23. If you're looking at the hard copy, it says Short Green Tara from POM, meaning from Power of Mantra. It's the one from the book itself. So if you were wanting to remember anything about the 21 Taras, you can peek at the book at the 21 Taras section. Remember, there was a nice little summary. And also there were those free commentaries in the Dropbox for those of you online. But you guys have whole libraries here, so harvest away. So I'll see you in an hour.